Okay, y'all. It's time for another daily Bible study in the book of Ezekiel. We're going to start today with chapter 10. So moving right along, let's get started. The chariot of Israel with Adonai Yahweh, Yahweh Elohim, on board is now preparing to lift up its wings and depart from the temple, escorted by the four living beings, the cherubim who are always present at the throne of Yahweh. It is important that we know how well and remember that our Father left his throne in heaven and came to his watchman from out of the north, meaning from on high, to first make him strong and then personally to deliver his message of the final judgment of Jerusalem. In this 10th chapter, Ezekiel will once again, 2 times for emphasis, go to great lengths to describe in the limited vocabulary of his day the awesome, highly polished spectrum bronze vehicle that he was privileged to see. One should ask, why is so much space in the word of Yahweh given to the description of these whirling wheels? And also, why are they described in the book of Ezekiel? The answer is simple. Because the watchmen of this final generation who will witness the final judgment are going to see similar vehicles, and our Father wants us to know that they are real. It is interesting and most timely that last evening on the History Channel there was a program about UFOs. Though there have been hoaxes and natural phenomena that account for some explanations, there is enough credible evidence of these unidentified flying objects, or should we say these unidentified flying wheels, UFWs, that their existence cannot be discounted nor denied. But they remain unexplained and unidentified to a world ignorant of Yahweh's word. You see, Yeshua Christ said as he sat upon the Mount of Olives over against the temple that he has foretold his servants all things concerning the events of this final generation. Mark 13:23, but take heed, behold, I have foretold you all things. He didn't mean that he had just told them everything right then and there, for he wasn't even yet finished speaking. He meant that all things foretold are in his word, including the book of Ezekiel for sure. We know that Satan and his angels are soon to be cast out of heaven to this earth. Okay, I want to pause here for a minute because this says soon to be cast out, but I believe that Revelation 12:7-9 tells us that they've already been cast out and are here in the earth, but that if you look at Revelation 9, I think it's I can't remember the exact verse, but in chapter 9, it says that there is a star that falls from heaven to the earth, and then we have these locusts that come out of the earth, and I think that's when these fallen angels resurface. Anyway, I guess that's up for debate, but I digress. Let's continue. And when he and those fallen angels make their appearance, it will be the most spectacular event in the history of mankind. Even many of Yahweh's elect underestimate the magnitude of his little h for little horn entering in his grand entrance. It will be as it was in the days of Noah and this world today, as then, including our brothers and sisters who follow the traditions of men, is not at all mentally nor spiritually prepared to face these wonderful angels and the one who leads them and calls himself the Messiah returned, who will be none other than the son of perdition, the Antichrist. I think we've seen evidence where some of these craft that they came or were kicked out of into the earth, have been going in and out of the waters, like in the ocean. I recall seeing something. So it's very possible that they will come up and then come back down, claiming to be Yahweh and his angels. But we know that when Yeshua returns, the flesh age is over. So pinch yourself, and if you're still in the flesh, then it's the spurious Messiah, not the real Messiah. Okay, what a tremendous advantage we have by knowing our Father's word, through which he has strengthened his watchmen. The time is at hand, which means very near. Note, if you are just joining our study of Ezekiel and have not read the first chapter, we suggest you do so, for we have already explained in detail much of that which is repeated in this chapter 10. Okay, chapter 10, verse 1. Then I looked, and behold, in the firmament that was above the head of the cherubims, there appeared over them, as it were, a sapphire stone, as the appearance of the likeness of a throne. What an awesome sight it must have been to see the very throne of Yahweh. Verse 2. And he spake unto the man clothed with linen, and said, Go in between the wheels, even under the cherub, and fill thy hands with coals of fire from between the cherubims, and scatter them over the city. And he went in my sight. Remember this man of linen from the previous chapter, who went about setting a tav, or a cross, upon the heads of the truly saved, who were spared the spiritual slaughtering which followed him. So this scattering of coals of fire over the city of Jerusalem is symbolic of Yahweh's judgment upon the house of Israel, for he is a consuming fire. Hebrews 12:29. For our Yahweh is a consuming fire. And although this scattering of fire over the city is specific to the judgment of the house of Yahweh, for the elders have failed to teach his word line by line and chapter by chapter, in Revelation 8, we read of the casting of fire from the altar of Yahweh over the whole earth at the judgment of the final hour to come upon this generation. Okay, looking at Revelation 8, verse 1. And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was a silence in heaven, about a space of half an hour. Verse 5. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. Verse 6. And the seven angels which had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound. Always remember from the graphic example in the book of Daniel of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that fire cannot and will not hurt those who serve and love Yahweh Elohim. Ezekiel 10, verse 3. Now the cherubim stood on the right side of the house, and when the man went in, and the cloud filled the inner court. The house is the house of Yahweh. Verse 4. Then the glory of Yahweh went up from the cherub and stood over the threshold of the house, and the house was filled with the cloud, and the court was full of the brightness of Yahweh's glory. Have you ever wondered what this was in Exodus 13:21? Let's see. Have you ever wondered what this was in Exodus 13:21? Quote, And Yahweh went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. Or have you settled for Cecil B. DeMille's concept in the classic film, The Ten Commandments? It might help to look up the word pillar in your Strong's Concordance and see that it means platform. Verse 5. And the sound of the cherubim's wings was heard even to the outer court, as the voice of the Almighty Yahweh when he speaketh. The sound of the wings was that of the wings of the wheels as they hovered. Verse 6. And it came to pass that when he had commanded the man clothed with the linen, saying, Take fire from between the wheels, from between the cherubims, then he went in and stood beside the wheels. Verse 7. And one cherub stretched forth his hands from between the cherubims into the fire that was between the cherubims, and took thereof, and put it into the hands of him that was clothed with linen, who took it and went out. After a while, this book of Ezekiel isn't so hard to read, is it? Of course, the Old English style of the King James Version leaves a lot to be desired for English readers today. After a while, this book of Ezekiel isn't so hard to read, is it? Of course, the Old English style of the King James Version leaves a lot to be desired for English readers today. Ezekiel 10, verse 8. And there appeared in the cherubims the form of a man's hand under their wings. And when I looked, behold, the 4 wheels by the cherubims, one wheel by one cherub, and another wheel by another cherub. And the appearance of the wheels was as the color of a beryl stone. As we learned in chapter 1, the word color is the Hebrew word ayin, which means appeared to the eyes as, or we could say looked like. These vehicles were brilliant and shiny like a gem, such as a topaz. Verse 10. And as for their appearances, they 4 had one likeness, as if a wheel had been in the midst of a wheel. Don't let this be difficult. Just picture these 4 escort ships in formation below and around the mothership. Ezekiel couldn't say it like that because he never saw Star Trek or Star Wars, although what he saw far surpasses any movie you or I have ever seen. Ezekiel 10, verse 11. When they went upon their 4 sides. They turned not as they went, but to the place whither the head looked, they followed it. They turned not as they went. The flying wheels were horizontal on their sides, not vertical like the wheels of a cart. They flew in any direction, while the emblems on their wings, like an American eagle insignia on a jet, and the cherubs inside faced forward and didn't turn as the vehicles moved any which way they wanted to, kind of like a helicopter can maneuver. This was definitely an unusual sight to a man 2,500 years ago. Verse 12. And their whole body and their backs and their hands and their wings and the wheels were full of eyes round about, even the wheels that they 4 had. They had windows, call them portholes, all around them. That's what full of eyes means. Verse 13. As for the wheels, it was cried unto them in my hearing, O wheel. O wheel in Hebrew translates to whirl, or whirl wheels, as one translation has it. Here's the Hebrew from Strong's. Galgal, Hebrew 1534. By reduplication from Hebrew 1556, galal, a wheel, by analogy, a whirlwind. Also dust, as whirled. Heaven, rolling thing, wheel. That's right, they were whirling, highly polished spectrum bronze flying discs. Ezekiel 10:14. And every one had 4 faces. The first face was the face of a cherub, the second face was the face of a man, and the third the face of a lion, and the fourth the face of an eagle. Remember, these are the same standards, the national emblems of the encampment of Israel. Here's an excerpt from our first study. The encampment from the book of Numbers, chapter 2. It shows on the north is Dan, whose emblem is the eagle. On the west is Ephraim, whose emblem was Taurus. On the east was Judah, whose emblem was the lion. And on the south is Reuben, a man. Note, if you are receiving this in text format only and aren't receiving the graphics, then turn to Numbers chapter 2 in your companion Bible, and you will see a diagram of the encampment of Israel. Ezekiel 10, verse 15. And the cherubims were lifted up. This is the living creature that I saw by the river of Chebar. This is the very same thing Ezekiel saw in chapter 1. Verse 16. And when the cherubims went, the wheels went by them. And when the cherubims lifted up their wings to mount up from the earth, the same wheels also turned not from beside them. This simply means that the cherubims and the wheels rose up together, obviously because the cherubims were in the vehicles. See chapter 1 and the next verse. And when they rose up, they raised their landing gear. Verse 17. When they stood, these stood, and when they were lifted up, these lifted up themselves also, for the spirit of the living creature was in them. They were inside the flying discs. I'm staying away from the phrase flying saucers, lest people accuse me of being nuts. They have enough cause already without me heaping coals of fire upon my own head. Verse 18. Then the glory of Yahweh departed from off the threshold of the house and stood over the cherubims. Our Father is always situated above, for he is the one on high. Ezekiel 10, verse 19. And the cherubims lifted up their wings and mounted up from the earth in my sight. When they went out, the wheels also were beside them, and every one stood at the door of the east gate of Yahweh's house, and the glory of Yahweh of Israel was over them above. They raised their landing gear and they took off. Then they hovered at the door of the east gate of the temple below the main vehicle before lifting off. Note, did you know that if you look out from the east gate of the temple, you will see the river Kedron and the Mount of Olives? Verse 20. This is the living creature that I saw under the Elohim of Israel by the river of Chebar, and I knew that they were the cherubims. This is exactly the same thing that Ezekiel saw in chapter 1. 21. Everyone had 4 faces apiece, and everyone 4 wings, and the likeness of the hands of a man was under their wings. And the likeness of their faces was the same faces which I saw by the river Chebar. Their appearances and themselves, they went every one straight forward. And so Ezekiel, the watchman of Yahweh, was privileged to see the chariot of Israel and the cherubims who piloted it. Look up the word horseman. In the following verse, this is the same chariot of Israel that was sent for Elijah. Remember, he was taken up in a whirlwind. And Elisha saw it and recognized the insignias of Israel, i.e., the eagle, the man, the ox, and the lion. 2 Kings 2, verse 12. And Elisha saw it, and he cried, my father, the chariot of Israel, and the horsemen thereof. And he saw him no more, and he took hold of his own clothes and rent them into pieces. What an exciting time we live in. The watchmen of this generation are being strengthened even as we read this study of his enlightening word. He has foretold us all things, and we thank him so much for that. Okay, this ends our study for today. We'll pick it up next time, probably in chapter 11. So until then, be blessed, and Yahweh keep you and bless you. Amen.